All right, I want to welcome on my next guest. We got a very special guest. We've got three-time Super Bowl champion, Dallas Cowboys legend, as well as former Air Force fighter pilot, Mr. Chad Hennings. Chad, how's everything going for you?
Life is good, my friend. Life is good.
All right, so my first question is, what the hell's going on with your Cowboys?
If I knew that, I'd be a very wealthy man. No, it's this whole year, this COVID stuff has been ridiculous. And I think just sports in general, it's when players can't, in the off season work out together, when they've been isolated, they can't interact with the new coach, with their coach, with the new coaching staff. And then we start to lose, man, the wheels just fall off the bus and it's tough to stay motivated and try to win games.
Has DeMarcus Lawrence called you and said, like, hey, what do I do?
No, but and I tell you, it's tough to watch.
Well, the division as a whole, like, they're in it, which is crazy. So it's wild. So I want to ask you a little about your early life. I saw some former interview today. Is it true you grew up on a farm with 1,200 cows?
Yeah. No, I grew up on a farm. I'm a farm boy from Iowa.
Wow.
And farm, the crops that we raised were to support a feedlot operation. So we'd have about 1,000 head of cattle on our property at any given time. So I grew up eating red meat twice a day, every day of my life.
Do you use them for pass wrestling drills at all or no?
Cow tipping was a big, great sport. That it helped me actually my wrestling, that and wrestling hogs, right?
Like a swim move, kind of getting around them.
That's right.
Yeah. So how did you decide upon going to Air Force?
For me, I wanted to have an experience that I wouldn't have going to a traditional school. I had several goals. I wanted to get a phenomenal education. I wanted to have an experience that's, again, not at your traditional school. And I wanted to play Division I college football. Those were my goals. And playing at the Air Force Academy was, it certainly filled all those aspirations for me. And I'm glad it worked out the way it did because it gave me an opportunity to experience so many different things in life, get a phenomenal education, improve my leadership abilities, and play Division I ball.
Was college and just having an interesting education, was that your goal at the time, or was the NFL at all on your radar?
NFL was never on my radar. Again, I grew up in a small rural community in Iowa that, all conference, but again, not highly recruited coming out of high school. And, when you choosing a service academy is not typically, when you go that route, you're not thinking about the NFL. And
David Robinson did it for the Spurs, so I think it's just you and him. So
but I can tell you that he went in not with the intention of going to the NBA because he grew 6 inches while he was there at the Naval Academy. So
was there a height requirement? Because I once heard that there was a height requirement, and he kind of got by because he grew once he got there.
Well, he did, and he kind of probably cut a deal that, hey, you stay here and let you play on the Olympic team, on the service team, and you can choose your assignments and eventually go play sooner than later.
Did you know you wanted to be a pilot?
No. I mean, it wasn't something that was a burning aspiration of mine growing up, but it's one of those things that having the experiences that I did at the academy, from flying in glider aircraft to flying in Cessna 172s, to get that experience, I caught the bug. And with all the different classes that I took there, from the aeronautical engineering classes, learning about flight, going to different active duty Air Force bases, seeing an F-16, F-15, A-10s take off and fly and do missions. Man, if you don't have the bug, you would get the bug once you experience that.
How many hours of training do you think you had before you actually got in an actual jet?
Which was crazy. We had... it was about 2 weeks of academics to learn the systems of the aircraft. And then, your first ride, you fly with an instructor pilot, but here you go. Crazy thing though, after I finished pilot training, when I received the assignment to fly the A-10, you've had about a year of pilot training at that point in time of jet time. You have a few hundred hours in the jet, but your first flight in the A-10 is solo. You learn the systems, and the mechanics of flight are all the same, but first flight was solo, which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah. No, because I didn't do so well with the parallel parking or the driver's test. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to cross that off my list. That's wild. And then so once you got in it, did you just kind of get that rush that you're like, all right, this feels right. I'm going to keep doing
this. For me, flying the A-10 was like a D lineman's dream, because the missions that we would fly I was assigned to an active duty base in England, and we'd forward deploy to Germany and Central Europe. And the missions that I would fly, I'd fly at, anywhere from a couple hundred feet to 500 feet above the ground in support of closer support of our armed forces, the infantry, and taking out, the enemy tanks.
Yeah.
And the missions that we would fly, a lot of it was being flexible, and it would change so much. The dynamics of the mission would change while you're in the air, and you communication, sometimes just hand signals with your wingman as to how to go about and execute a mission. It was awesome. And there was so much preparation.
Yeah.
And the experience that I had with doing that it has helped me ultimately when I got to the Cowboys, as well as in business, is to just how to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And I'm so very fortunate that I had that experience in life.
What kind of leg room do they have in those jets? Because I know you're a tall guy.
Leg room, no, I had received waivers for my height and my weight to be able to fly. I was too tall and too heavy. So I was crammed in there. But Zach, when you're a 23, 24, 25-year-old kid, you don't think about the what ifs. It's all about the rush and the experience. And I was definitely in that camp.
Yeah. So I have a question. Were some of like the conditions you were flying in is like now like driving in the worst fog, worst, like everything is nothing compared to being up in the air? Like in terms of like bad weather conditions, now you're like,
bad weather conditions. Yeah. When flying missions out of England, where it's complete overcast clouds from end of, first part of October through April, that you're flying in the weather all the time. I mean, England is probably one of the most depressing places to be during that time of year because you never see the sun.
Well, they're still in 1883. So that's the thing.
But no, we had to learn, and particularly when you fly in fingertip formation, where you have just 3 feet of wingtip clearance between jets, where you're flying as one jet.
Wow.
You're going through that weather, and many times all you can see is a flashing light on his wingtip, top and bottom of his fuselage, as well as in front of his nose cone. That's all you can see. I mean, you may be flying upside down as far as you know. You have no horizontal or horizon references. You don't know. So there's a lot of trust with your flight lead of whether he's doing the job correctly.
I saw one story you were telling about how one time I don't think you had enough fuel and you had to land somewhere and nobody spoke English.
Well, it was on my initial. We were ferrying jets out of England to Turkey when we were first deployed in the Gulf War. Over the Mediterranean, I ended up losing one of my engines. The A-10 is a 2-engine aircraft. My number 2, my right engine, ended up losing an oil seal, so I was spewing oil out. And in that case, when you have that type of emergency procedure, you shut the engine down. So I had to land single engine at a naval base in Suda Bay, Crete, on the island of Crete, and talking to Greek air controllers. It was kind of stressful and task saturating of just to communicate with somebody that speaks English as a second language, trying to tell them what situation that you're dealing with, and hey, you need to get down and land soon. Because the A-10 is an underpowered aircraft. It flies okay on 2 engines. But on one engine, you need to manage your flight speed and your altitude and your airspeed very efficiently.
You said that was your first flight?
No, my first. Well.
Oh, okay. I was going to say because like that's wild. That would be wild.
That would have been. That's crazy. But no, we were right over the Mediterranean Sea, where all you can see is a couple islands off in the distance, and not much else aside from water everywhere.
I figured like you get to your land there and you're like, no one speaks English, and you're like, all right, I live here now. Like this is, that's wild. And then, so you continue to have a storied career in the Air Force while so you were playing football. How did you have enough time to focus on everything you needed to? Cause I'm sure your course load was much more than the average students.
Yeah. I mean, when I was at the Air Force Academy, it's the college experience that I would average probably 20 credit hours a semester.
Okay.
Plus the military training we did, plus, practice and playing games. So you learn to manage your time very well. And if you didn't, it was a sink or swim mentality. If you didn't learn that skill set, you weren't going to last long.
I saw, is it true you were drafted by Tom Landry, but it was before your service time?
Yeah, Tom Landry, Gil Brandt, Tex Schramm, that era drafted me in the 11th round in 1988. So it's a long time ago when they had 11 rounds in the draft.
Yeah.
But my time when I was able to ultimately get to the Cowboys, Jerry Jones had bought the team. Jimmy Johnson was the coach. And they didn't know who the heck I was when I was finally eligible to come and play.
So how does the contract roll over that? Was it just kind of like, all right, your rookie contract starts now, or how did that work?
I'm sure they're still the same, but there was a provision in all NFL contracts that in time of national crisis or emergency where people go to war, this dates back to the Korean conflict, World War II, the Vietnam era, that if, a guy was drafted and went off to war, that his contractual rights were retained by the team that drafted him or held his contract. So I kind of came in under that provision.
So when you get to the Cowboys, when was the last time you played organized football?
4 years prior, a little over 4 years prior to that.
So did you expect the workout to go as well as it did, or what were you hearing? What did you think they were?
Well, two different things. Well, we're talking how the actual went was our armed forces were going through a reduction in force, meaning that they were waiving commitment time from the guys because we needed to downsize after the first Gulf War. This was in early '92. They waived my pilot training commitment. See, the standard commitment graduating from a service academy is 5 years.
Okay.
My commitment was 8 years because I went through pilot training. They spend a little more money on you, try to train you, so they want you for a longer period of time. So I had an 8-year commitment, and at this point in time, I had been in the Air Force for 4 years. But the Air Force went and they waived the pilot training commitment, so I ended up still owing them 1 year, in for 4, now a minimum of a 5-year commitment. Okay. But not enough individuals were getting out, so they then waived 24 months or 2 years off the service academy commitment, which then allowed me to go pursue, something else. And not just for me, but a lot of my peers went to go fly for the airlines at that point in time.
Oh, cool.
So when the guy when they drafted me, the agent who represented me, I contacted him and said, "Hey, I'm eligible to get out. Are the Cowboys still interested in me?" Because they transitioned in ownership. He calls me back the next day. Long story short, there was a ticket waiting for me at London Heathrow Airport. I flew to Dallas, did a workout for the Cowboys, obviously impressed them enough that they took a flyer on me, wanted me out. Jimmy Johnson asked, "Hey, we like what we see. When can you join us?" I have no idea. I salute smartly and said, "I'll let you know, sir." Flew back to England, submitted my paperwork. Within 3 weeks, I was out processed out of the Air Force. Wow. Flying back to the States to start my first training camp.
Did they add you to the 53 or however many players at a time, or the practice squad?
No, I was actually, then I went through the training camp with them and I made the 53-man squad at that point in time. And so, my thing, Zach, I flew my last mission in Northern Iraq in the early part of '92, and I played in the Super Bowl the same year. That's how fast life happened for me.
Unbelievable. Have you ever flown Jerry Jones' plane? You ever said, "Hey, I can help you out?"
I've flown in it. I've never flown it. Well, I take that back. I have. I got stuck in this plane. I knew the pilots, and they let me come up and fly a little bit when I was on it.
Does Jerry know you were doing that or not?
I'm sure we were doing barrel rolls and loops and aileron rolls and everything else.
Unbelievable. So you get to the Cowboys. What's your experience? What's your what's it like? Because you're obviously older than all the other rookies on the team. You've been through the military. What was it? An easy adjustment period? What was that like?
Well, there's always an adjustment period. There's certain stress levels. That on those, the hierarchy of life stress. The top two, like if there's a death in the family, change of occupation, a move. I had two of like the top 3 stress factors working for me. So having not played the game in, 4 years, adjusting to a climate where Europe, it's in the summertime, a high of 78, moving to Texas where it's 95 degrees and 70% humidity, putting on the pads, it was a big adjustment for me to be able to do that. But, perseverance and commitment ruled the day.
Yeah. What was your first memory of meeting Michael Irvin?
First memory of meeting Michael that I can mention?
Yeah.
See, Michael and I were in their first draft class, and I would tease, to your earlier question too, I would tease my teammates that, "Hey guys, do whatever you want, say whatever you want to me. I've had a real job before I came here. I was a fighter pilot. I flew missions, quote unquote combat missions, and I've flown jets. So there's not much from a mental stress standpoint you're going to throw at me that's going to move the needle. But, it's a different form of stress, physical stress, mental stress. But Michael's a character. I mean, I think with the guys like Mark Tuaney, Frank Cornish, Nate Newton, Charles Haley, if you guys remember all those names.
Oh, yeah.
These guys, there was more levity in the locker room. I've never laughed so hard in my life.
That's
Just
awesome.
some of the pranks that they would pull on each other. You can imagine when you're 25 years old, you're a millionaire, you have access to all this cash, but you're still a 15-year-old kid at heart.
Yeah.
So it is hilarious what some of the pranks that they pull on one another.